We're back. The Auburn Live Football Show is back. Another season is about to get underway. Mr. Alan Head joins me. What's up, man? Are you ready?
I'm ready, Justin. You know what? Watching Florida State versus Georgia Tech got me, primed for today. It is officially college football season. Nice to see an upset yesterday. Hopefully, we won't see one for the Auburn Tigers on Saturday.
Ooh.
That would be a huge upset if that would happen.
Yeah, really tough day for Florida State. I mean, an entire offseason of dealing with not making the playoff, getting trounced, and a whole offseason of just being mad about that. And then you come out with a new look team, and it's not the same thing. It's not the same season, but there's a little bit of like, let's show we should have been in this thing, and then you lose to unranked Georgia Tech. Bad day to be a Florida State fan.
And if you want to put a cherry on top of that bad, you're also suing the ACC. So, insult to injury on top of everything else.
I saw a great tweet. I don't know who sent it. It was so good because, they're suing the SEC, right? They won out. It was like the tweet was it said Florida State is what did it say? Florida State is having difficulty with their passing game and bombing long field goals. They're just openly flirting with the Big Ten.
That's like, perfect.
Perfect.
Yes, that's perfect.
Can't throw downfield as bombing long field goals. They're just openly flirting with the Big Ten at this point. Man, it was amazing. Okay, we're going to talk about we're going to get into some predictions. I think today we'll kind of just sort season as a whole, expectations.
Sure.
We'll go a little bit game by game and just kind of lay the groundwork because we don't have to jump into Alabama A&M a whole lot. I mean, Auburn's going to win that one, so we don't have to preview that one a ton. Before we get to some of that, quick shout out to our sponsor, main sponsor of the show, Session Cocktail in downtown Auburn, right there on Magnolia Avenue, downtown Auburn, right next to Taco Mama. So go check them out. Session Cocktail, awesome place to have happy hour drinks or a quick drink before dinner or a quick drink after dinner, downtown. It's a great spot to pop in on game day. I think they'll be open, those afternoons. They're open on Sundays now. They open at noon on Sundays now, so it's a great spot to go have an afternoon drink downtown if you're walking around, especially when it's still warm. Go check them out on a Sunday afternoon as well. Again, like we've talked about, they have bar seating and couch seating and lounge seating. It's not people just standing around and waiting in line and all that good stuff. So go check them out. I'm actually hosting trivia, by the way, Auburn football trivia this Tuesday night at Session. And I'm hosting. I had to come up with 40 questions.
Whew.
Multiple choice. I've got it. It went not bad. A lot of broad, like general. But yes, if anybody's hearing this and you're in town or whatever, come by. I think the winner gets I don't want to say because I'm not sure. I think the winner gets half off their bar tab for the night, and there's second place. There's some prizes, but a lot of it's like a gift card or money off your tab and all that good stuff. But yeah, I had to make up some trivia questions. People are gonna learn. People are gonna learn some things, man. They're gonna learn about the '80s.
I like it.
They're gonna learn about some coaches. I thought about how can I slide Brian Harsin in here just to take a shot, but I couldn't really figure one out. I was like, who is the but I couldn't really.
No, you'd probably have to go who has the least wins amongst former Auburn head football coaches. And I think he would definitely have the least for anybody that's coached over 10 games.
Yeah. If only these questions were subjective.
Yes.
That would have been a good one. Or I could just make him the answer to all four.
There you go.
You could do that as well. Yeah. Who is not welcome back in Auburn? Brian Harsin. All right, let's get into this. I put up some predictions on Saturday, which I haven't done that a lot in the past. I don't love predictions like for the whole season. I'm okay with maybe like a season record, but I don't necessarily love doing game by game or anything like that. Even week to week predicting the games. I just, I don't know. I don't love it, but I don't know. I had a lot of thoughts on the season and want to put it out there. But more importantly, I had thoughts on how I'm looking at this season. And because I just feel like, man, whether it's fair to Hugh Freeze or not, if Hugh Freeze were listening to this, he'd be like, hey, man, that's not helping me out much. But I'm just sort of at a point, and I've talked about it a little bit on the corner, where for me, 8-4, 4-4 is my floor.
Mhm.
And maybe that's not fair. Maybe you're looking at the schedule going, golly, man, that's, but man, it's been 4 seasons of mediocre football at best at Auburn. And it's just time to break through that. And I wrote, I'm not saying Auburn needs to win 10. I'm not saying they have to be in the playoff. But there's too much positivity going on. And I also talked about like timing. You've had a great recruiting class last year. You have a phenomenal one going now. Sometimes you just got to go do it. And I know, I get the expectations thing. It's not about putting pressure on them, but I don't think 8-4 and 4-4 is too much pressure. I don't think it's too much to ask. To me, this roster can do that. To me, this is not a roster that is happy with 3-5 in the league. It's just not, to me. It's better than that. There's a bunch of 50-50 games. I get it. But it's just, to me, it's time for a breakthrough. And for me, that means, yes, building on overall wins, but it means getting a ranked win, something you haven't done since 2021. And maybe a bowl win, we'll see. But it's more about a ranked win and being at least 500 in the league, 4-4. Get to 4-4 in the league, get a ranked win, which could be A&M, could be Kentucky, could be Oklahoma. We'll see. Maybe they upset somebody else. But like, do you feel like that's fair? Do you sort of see where I'm coming from? Where I get Hugh Freeze wouldn't want to go. Hugh Freeze is like, hey, it's just my second season, man. Give me into year 3. But I think, unfortunately for Freeze, like, it is what it is. You've got 2 years of Harsin that people are just still annoyed about, and you have the last season of Malzahn, and I think people are just going to speed up the timeline a little bit on him. But I don't think 8-4 and 4-4 is unreasonable, and I just think they need a breakthrough. And for me, that's like a ranked win, getting to 500 in the league. And I know some people are like 7-5. That's the seal. That's the floor. No, not for me. 8-4, 4-4 is the floor for me.
No, and I hear you, and I'm one of those that thinks 7-5 is the floor but here's the thing. I'm with you on the ranked win. That is the bigger deal to me is Auburn doesn't have a marquee win in the last 4 years to really hang its hat on beyond Brian Harsin beating an Ole Miss team where Lane Kiffin went for it on 4th and whatever about 12 different times. And it was just, if Kiffin plays that game semi-moderately, they walk away winning that game, in my honest opinion. But he shot himself in the foot.
Yeah. Agreed.
But that's the last ranked win that Auburn has. To me, that's the bigger deal, is you have to have a marquee game where Auburn shows up and shows that it's still Auburn. Because of the amount of roster reconstruction that Hugh has had to make from the Harsin era. I mean, Justin, I think you're very familiar with basically what talent was left on the roster when Hugh took it over and to get it to the point that it's at now. And I'm with you. This is a roster that is very capable of going 8-4. If it gets a few bounces, this is a roster that is capable of going 9-3, in my opinion. So it all depends. I still think floor is 7-5, ceiling is probably 9-3, and I'm okay with that if one of those is a ranked win, and if you can win your bowl game and get to 8-5. If you get to 8 wins, to me, because I'm with you. It is like, from an Auburn perspective, it's time for Auburn to be 8+ and 4-4 in the league. Like, it's time. For Hugh Freeze, though, I look at it a little bit on a different timetable because this is year 2, and so, because of the amount of the rebuild he's had to make, I give him a slight break on that. And I think 7's okay, so long as, like you said, one of those is a ranked, and then you get into a decent bowl game and you win that bowl game. You show up prepared and you win the bowl game. And I think people walk away from an 8-5 season. You've moved the ball forward, right? You didn't move backwards. You didn't pull a Billy Napier where you go 5-7 in year 2. Instead, you go 8-5 and show a 2-game improvement. So long as there's a trajectory moving forward. And then I think probably what you would have to do is you would also have to nail it in the transfer portal with a quarterback to be able to sell that to your fan base of, okay, we're going to be significantly better next year. We're going to take that quantum leap forward. But so long as you don't move backwards, in my opinion, that's the biggest thing. It can't be 6-6. It can't be 5-7. If it's 7-5 with a ranked win, I can do that. I can sell that. I can make that float. Would I feel better if it were 8-4? Absolutely. And I'm with you on the fact that it has been mediocre at best for the last 4 years. I mean, you had Gus's 6-4, Harsin 6-7, 5-7 the year where Harsin gets fired middle of the year, and Caddy has to win 2 games down the stretch just to get us to that point. And then last year you had the opportunity to be 7-5, maybe 8-4 if New Mexico State and Alabama go significantly different. So I can understand where a lot of people's perspectives are on this. I think it's just I'm aware how deep the SEC is this year, and I think adding Oklahoma to the schedule provides another game that becomes a toss-up that maybe Auburn wouldn't have had a year ago, where 8-4 might have been more attainable. But it is what it is. You do drop LSU off the schedule when you pick them up, so realistically, you're just swapping one for the other. And so I can go both routes on this. I really can. But 8-4, you're not going to hear an argument from me on that being a reasonable expectation for this year. I think it is reasonable. That is my prediction. But if it goes 7-5 and you get a ranked win, I'm not upset with it either, right? I can still see it being moved forward.
Yeah. And certainly there's different ways this could play out. You could go 7-5. But if you go 7-5, that would be equally as frustrating. If you go 7-5, which means you're likely 3-5 in the league.
Right.
I doubt you're 7-5 with a loss to Cal, but 4-4 in the league. I mean, maybe, but if you're 7-5, you're probably 3-5 in the league. But if one of those happens to be a ranked win, that's even more frustrating. Like you had a conference win, and then you only got two more. That would be my thing, though. If you go 3-5 in the league, let's just Vanderbilt, Arkansas. Let's assume those are two.
Right.
So that's my issue. We go through another year where you look back and you go, okay, what did you accomplish this year? Well, you beat Vanderbilt. Congratulations. That doesn't even count. You beat Arkansas, who
sure, everybody's fired Sam Pittman coming into the season. Yeah.
And then you won one more. And it's like that's what you did. And then you look and then you start to go, okay, and then last year who'd you beat in conference? Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, and Arkansas last year. So you'd have 2 straight years where you beat Vanderbilt and Arkansas, and then you tack on a Mississippi State or a somebody. That's your last 2 years. You go back to 2022, you beat Missouri, and you shouldn't have, and then you beat A&M, and they had a losing record. That's your last 3 years. That's when I'm getting to the point of like breaking through, and I just can't do 3-5 again because you start to look at the 3-year time of like just – you beat literally the worst teams in the league is all you could muster. And I just think Auburn's better than that. I think the other thing is defining floor.
Yeah.
So like is floor, when I'm talking about floor, when I say 8-4, 4-4 is my floor, I'm talking about when I'm defining floor is more about an expectation than like what could happen. Like I wrote, they could go 6-6. It'd be wildly disappointing because they would lose pretty much every toss-up game. They would just win the ones they were supposed to, and they'd lose all the rest. They could go 7-5, 3-5. I wrote that. So that absolutely could happen. I said, I just think they're better than that. So like when I say floor, it doesn't mean when I'm saying 8-4, 4-4, I don't mean I don't think it's possible they do worse.
Sure.
Definitely go 7-5. That's my expectation. That's where I think they should be is my floor versus if you told me like probabilities, 7-5, 3-5 would have, I don't know if there's like a really good chance, but that would have a little bit of life in terms of probability. I still think 8-4 and 4-4 is better. Really, you're looking at Oklahoma, Missouri, Kentucky, and A&M. Those are the 4 games. Can you split those? 2 are at home, 2 are away. Can you split those 4 and you're at 8-4 and 4-4? If you can split them, like when I wrote, I had them beating Oklahoma and Kentucky, losing to Missouri, and losing to A&M. I could have flipped A&M in Kentucky. I could have flipped A&M in Oklahoma. But it's just, can you split those 2? And I feel like they have a roster and some momentum and confidence in the building and stuff to be able to do that. Like I think at the end of the season, if you walk away and go, you went 1-3 in those, and assuming you get beat by Bama and Georgia, which is not, there's not a harder task you could ask than to go to Alabama or Georgia. There's nothing, it's not a big deal. Beat Cal. If you walk away and go, you went 1-3 in kind of your 4 toss-up games, I just don't know that I'll be thrilled about that. And you're right. How it happens matters. Is it some crazy bounce where you're like, they got screwed? They absolutely should be 2-2. I can't even really fault them for that. Or, does it go the other way? Do they go 2-2 and then go to Alabama and Georgia and get destroyed? And we're going, okay, golly, they got to 8-4, but man, we went way backwards in the Bama and Georgia matchups. How do those were just so. There's a lot of things that can play into that. I think how you look at the season. I do agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's funny how optics go, and I think the biggest thing is seeing more cohesion and offensively speaking, them taking a step forward from what was atrocious at times last year. I mean, when they were unable to run the football, there was a lack of explosives all year long. There was really, you could just sense the frustration amongst the players and the coaches, with the exception, obviously, of Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, and Arkansas. Those were easily their best offensive games. And look, you were matched up against probably the three worst teams on your schedule. I would put Cal as a better team than all three of those teams this time last year.
Yep.
And so can you look better against the middle of your schedule? Not just the teams that are on the low end. And we expect that Arkansas and Vanderbilt, along with three other teams that you're going to play in the non-con, are on the lower end of what you're going to face from a competition standpoint. So when you're battling the Missouris, the Kentuckys, the Oklahomas, the Texas A&Ms, can you look better? Offensively speaking, can you be efficient? Can you be close in these games? Even if you don't win them, if you're optically speaking, if it appears as though you've taken a step forward from an on-the-field product standpoint, and you can turn around and you can sell that to your fan base, to your donor base, which, look, in today's age, and Justin, you know this better than anyone, if you don't have an engaged donor base with being able to show them proof of concept and say, hey, with just a little bit more of a contribution, we can be significantly better in this point or objective of the game, then realistically, you're lost. And so Hugh Freeze has done a really good job of being transparent to this point. He's done a good job of engagement, but now he's got to show them some of that proof of concept to continue to keep them engaged and show them why and what their resources are going to. And I think that's probably the biggest part that 8-4 gets you to, is you have a product on the field that you can stamp and say, hey, this was an investment well worth it. Now, if we're able to, take this house settlement, and we're able to kind of incorporate that into the 15 or 16 million that you're going to allocate towards football. And in addition to whatever the donors are going to provide on top of that, how they're going to do it, I'm not exactly sure how they're going to thread that needle, but obviously I don't think collectives are going away. They're just going to be retooled or repurposed, maybe even moved in-house. But you're still going to need those people in your back pocket to continuously fund your football team. And so to do that, and to also work within the athletic department of getting the money that you need, you have to be able to put a product on the field that you can sell. And like you said, how you look in those games, if it's 7-5, you better be close, man. And you better be showing like, hey, we're just right there. We're knocking at the doorstep, and you get that ranked win. If you're 8-4, you really don't need to get blown. I mean, look, if you get blown out, you get blown out, right? It's one game, but it can't be both Alabama and Georgia where it looks like you're just not competitive. And we've been and look, over the last 4 years, when you go to Tuscaloosa and you go to Athens, they have been blowouts. I mean, big time blowouts.
Yeah.
And so can you narrow the gap in their venue, right? Can you narrow the gap when you go to Sanford Stadium, when you go to Bryant-Denny, and make it to where Auburn's, they're in it. They're, maybe a touchdown at back, or, a 10-point loss in a really competitive game that goes back and forth for a little bit. I think those are the things that Auburn fans are looking for, that your alumni are looking for, your boosters, everybody, even the media that is looking to frame a narrative around Auburn, right? Because that's part of it. What you write on Sundays matters after a Saturday matchup. And I think when you get to the point that the narrative that you're constructing is Auburn is really that team on the rise, not just in recruiting, but it's reflective in on-the-field product, then you'll know that Auburn is kind of, they've gotten over the hump somewhat. And we haven't been able to do that in quite a bit of time.
All right, we're going to continue with some predictions and all that stuff in just a second. Quick shout out to a second sponsor of the show, GameTime.co. We talked about them last year, by the way. If you need tickets for games or comedy shows or concerts or whatever, GameTime.co provides a really great resource for that. Download the app. Use the promo code War Eagle. You get $20 off your first purchase. But it's a really sweet app. They started about 12 years ago. And they've just taken off. You'll start to see their ads everywhere now that I've mentioned it. But it's a great place to get last minute tickets in all over the country, even into Canada and all that good stuff. So use that promo code War Eagle get $20 off gametime.co. And then they also offer, if you get tickets through them, find tickets cheaper somewhere else, they'll give you money back if you show that, hey, I just got them through you, but here they are here's the exact same ticket, or basically the exact same ticket for less. There's ways you can get discounts and money back and stuff like that. So they're true to the word. In that regard, it's like a price differentiator. If you find tickets, I think they'll credit you like 110%, because there's fees and stuff like that. So they'll credit you some of that money back. So make sure and go check out that gametime.co and download the app, and that would be greatly appreciated. Yeah, you make a good point, Alan, about donors, certainly, and keeping that going. That's why I tossed in the ranked win comment, because that's one of the ones I hear the most from people. Like, they want to like beat somebody, have some bragging rights. These guys want to be able to be like, to really show that you're on par with these programs. Saw a little bit of love on College Game Day. I saw Kirk Herbstreit's comments. I saw Nick Saban's comments. Saban said Auburn's going to be one of the more improved teams. Kirk Herbstreit said something along those lines, basically like, watch out for Auburn, better receivers, don't sleep on Auburn. And I do agree. I mean, if you were to take yourself away, outsiders looking into the conference, Auburn's would make a lot of sense as a pick to be a sleeper pick, like who's not being talked about, but could surprise. Like, Auburn would make sense. Kentucky, I don't know that they necessarily have the firepower. Like, they're just kind of, I don't know. They're going to be good, but I don't know that they're going to be, I don't know if they have Auburn's potential. Missouri's going to be good. Oklahoma's right there with Auburn, 7.5 wins. Vegas, like Jackson Arnold. I mean, maybe they're kind of right there too. You got to figure that they've always got pretty good talent. You got to figure they're probably a team that maybe could definitely, with a quarterback the caliber of Jackson Arnold, they're certainly a team, a fantastic linebacker, Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman. But like, they're a team that could be a sleeper. Everybody thinks Bama is going to be good. Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, LSU even. I think most people think they're going to be really good, obviously. So that's why that Oklahoma-Auburn game, I think, is so big. It's just both those teams are in such similar places in terms of expectations and having a little bit of talent on that roster where they could surprise as well. And so that game for both teams is such a big one. I talked to Peter Burns about this last week. He kind of made what he said about it was it's a belief game for Auburn.
Yes,
and I agree. Like, it's a lot. If you lose that game, if you beat Arkansas and lose that game, and then go Georgia and then go Missouri, you could be 1-3. What if you go to Kentucky and lose? You'll be 1-4 in the league, and that then it becomes a really tall task for the coaching staff to keep them together. Like, listen, guys, we still got a season, we still got A&M, we still got stay in the fight. Whereas if you get Oklahoma, it keeps you in the fight so much longer, even if you do hit a little tough spell in October. You've got those 2 wins under your belt. Oklahoma will be a ranked win. Like, it's such a it would be such a, I don't even really know how it would equate it to, but it would just be such a energy boost early on, and it can sustain you a little bit through what could be a tough month in October. That Oklahoma game is so huge. But yeah, I don't think we're being unfair. I think, I think Hugh Freeze would love to say, hey, it's just year 2, but I don't know. I just see it. I don't know. I mean, Peyton Thorne, I was talking to somebody the other day. I'm like, there's literally not a variable on offense. Find me a variable that impacts offensive production, and I will tell you it's better from last year to this year. Like, just name one. Like, personnel or culture or playbook or cohesion or coaching staff or confidence, or just name a variable that could impact it. And I think it's better on offense, especially with Peyton Thorne. And I think the defense will be okay. I don't think the defense is going to be a juggernaut, but I think they will be okay. And if everybody stays healthy and a few of these young players develop by October, what kind of player is Amaris Williams? What kind of player is JC Hart? I mean, by October, are they like solidified, reliable players? I think the defense is almost more of a question mark a little bit. Maybe because we believe in the receivers so much on offense. But yeah, that Oklahoma game is going to be a monster. The Cal game will be tricky too. But yeah, I just think I think back to the timing issue as well. You got a number 8 recruiting class last year. You got maybe a top 3 recruiting class. It's very possible.
Yeah, by the time of kickoff, absolutely, it's possible.
Yeah. So it's almost like, even if you told me, hey, I don't think it's fair for you to expect 8-4. That's what you told me. Hey, I don't think you're being fair. I think it's a 7-5 team. I think you're being unrealistic with 8-4. I would be like, I don't think I'm that unrealistic, but tack on the recruiting that's going on, and I would be like, too bad. You got to go do it. You got to go make it happen. There's too much momentum off the field with recruiting. You have got to break through off this recruiting class, break through with 8 wins, and then go sign a top 3 class. Like, I just think the timing of it matters. It's one of those things where it's like, I would tell you to like just push through it a little bit, finish those last few reps, like get to that 8 win, get to 8-4, get to 4-4, and the momentum of recruiting and the expectations. Of course, then they'll be off and running going into next spring. That receiver room next spring, if everybody comes back. Well, Keandre won't, but everybody else. But I don't know. I just think the timing of it matters too, man. I don't want to squander the momentum you've got.
No, I hear you. And you make a very valid point, specifically on the recruiting aspect of things. You cannot lose momentum in recruiting. And the quickest way to do that is to have losses on the field that start to mount up. You know, I say it in jest now, you can't have a Billy Napier type season, but think about where they were this time last year. I think they were top 5 in recruiting, coming off of a 6-7 year. They go in, they look terrible against Utah. And throughout the season, they're just kind of played with inconsistency. And it ends up with a 5-7 type season. Now in year 3, Billy Napier's on the hot seat. They've also got other issues off the field over there that I'm not going to kind of get into in the NIL world or NIL space, but things that won't be an issue here at Auburn. But you saw how that class kind of fell apart down the stretch and what they could have accomplished by comparison to where they are now. And so if you're Q3s, you want to avoid that at all costs. I think you still do that at 7-5, but I'm with you on the 8-4. The momentum that gives you, if you get that ranked win, you get to 4-4 in conference, you go to an upper tier bowl game. Hopefully you put a competent product on the field at that point. And there's so many good things that can happen for Auburn from a perspective standpoint, from an optics standpoint, and then kind of how you leverage the transfer portal in addition to that to kind of fill some deficiencies that you're going to have after this year, because you are graduating a lot of talent. That is the one thing, a lot of experienced players off this roster. I think, Justin, last check at your roster projection, we have like 23 seniors, I believe, or something of that nature, somewhere in that range. So that's a lot to lose from an 85-man roster. Now, who knows what that's going to look like moving forward? Obviously, 105 is in the works and may be solidified here relatively soon. And I think that's set to take place no later than July 1st of 2025, if that does come to fruition. There's still some things to go there, but losing 20-plus players off of an 85-man roster, that's a fourth of your roster.
Yeah.
Now you're upgrading it in talent, but the problem is sometimes young and experienced talent doesn't always translate into wins right away. It does eventually, but they have to get that experience, and sometimes you have some costly mistakes. So you're going to have to mitigate some of these losses through the transfer portal, and I think what you're talking about is the continuous momentum that you would get if you can get the Oklahoma game. And I'm going to steal a line from Cole, who's dubbed this on our call-in show, is he's called basically Cal our litmus test game, right? Like, this is going to tell us how good Auburn possibly can be this year. And then Oklahoma is the change agent game. That is the one that's going to shift the expectation to where you and I think 8-4 right now is where we need to be. Win Oklahoma and mess around with the amount of momentum you're going to have at that point. I think the fan base is going to erupt if you win that one. And I really think that Missouri's on the table. If you get that one, the kind of funny bounces and the changes in momentum that you can have, because here's the thing, Justin, and you and I have talked about this. There are teams every year that come in highly ranked that end up losing games they shouldn't, or they don't play up to expectation. I think Missouri is one of those teams that has the potential to not play up to expectation. I really do. I think they had a lot of close wins last year. They lost some valuable pieces. Now they returned their 2 best pieces, but you lost some veteran talent off that team that I don't know that they're going to be able to replicate that. And the schedule's not exactly the same. It's probably even a little easier for them, but I think that's a winnable game for Auburn, because I don't know that Missouri will be truly tested at that point coming into that situation. Win Missouri, now we're down to Kentucky and A&M. If you can win one of those, well, now you're at 9-3, possibly 10-2. And if Auburn can get to that, and that's a lot of ifs, right? That's a lot of ifs, but I can paint a picture where you get there. I really can. And I think when you talk about the potential of this roster, that's where the potential is. The potential is there is a ceiling of 10-2 on this. There really is. And then you got some injuries. There's probably a floor of 6-6 in there, maybe even 5-7 if you have injuries at the most pivotal positions.
Sure.
So it would be truly interesting to see how this all shakes out. It really will.
Yeah, the Missouri one's for sure on the table. I kind of put that one as the hardest among the four that I've talked about, only because one on the road, and experienced quarterback. You're going into their place, and they've got a fantastic quarterback. If they're what everybody thinks they're going to be, that becomes tough. Like I think A&M and Oklahoma are, in Missouri, there's probably not a big difference in those teams. I mean, quarterback Brady Cook, but like overall ability, I think being on the road, that's a tough one. I was going to say, I would agree with that about kind of the Cal and OU. I mean, I think Cal, when I was writing up that preview, looking at them a little bit, they're not bad. I mean, you've got Jay Knott back. You've got a quarterback that can sling it around a little bit.
Yep.
They're not bad. And look, you barely beat them last year, and it was maybe shouldn't have. And I get that Auburn's better, but just still, like they're going to come in going, we had you guys beat last year. We're not, that is absolutely going to be. If Auburn walks into that game and we're like win by 17, if Auburn walked away and won that game like 34-14, I'd be like, huh. I mean, I would, Cal's not great, but like that would be a little surprising. If they were in control start to finish, it's that kind of game, that'd be a little surprising. So I'm kind of with you on Cal being a little bit of, okay, is it another squeaker? If it is, you're going, okay, well, how much better are we?
Right.
Or do you go in there and go, okay, you just controlled that game. You didn't do it last year. You did that this year, and it's a pretty good Cal team, and you controlled that game. Now I can see where you can go. Here's what I would ask. What would keep, and you kind of mentioned injuries, obviously those are things we can't account for. I guess assuming injuries, that obviously is one. What's another one or two things that would keep them from reaching expectations? Or you can go the other way with it. What's a thing or two that it's like, if this switch gets turned on, or if this guy develops at a rate that we think he might, or maybe this guy pops off even more than we think he might, then now like I expect him to go into Missouri and win or whatever. Like, is there something maybe one both ways? Like if this happens, it could be detrimental, or if this one or two things happens, like this pushes them into another level of what they can accomplish, like off the top of your head?
Sure. Well, the first thing that jumps out to you always, Justin, is the championship level depth. Is that where it needs to be? Like, I really like our first 22.
Define that, by the way. Like because I'm glad you said that. I saw somebody make a point on the bunker, or not on the bunker, on the corner about like what does that mean? I kind of know what it means when I wrote it, and I'll say it. But when you say championship level depth,
So obviously your first 22, so your 11 starters on offense and defense, I think they're as good as most teams in the SEC, if not better. I mean, I would really put us in the top half on the first 22. But the championship level depth is when you get beyond that, when you start talking about your 44, because you're going to have injuries. You're going to have nicks and bruises throughout the year. You're going to have performances where guys just show up flat. And you need to be able to insert someone in there that you can either replicate the same production of what you typically get out of your starter, or somebody who's not going to be a liability. And within that 44, I don't know that we're there yet at every position. And so I think that's what, when I talk about 7 and 5, I think that's what I see is there's the potential that you're going to have somebody that's going to have an off game. And do you have an answer to replace them within the lineup? And I don't know that we're there just yet. Like if Kay and Lee were to go down, do we have somebody we know that can step in there? You don't know right now. I mean, I think we've got some guys that you feel good about, but you don't know that just yet. Same thing across the defensive line. You feel really good about Keldrick Falk, and then beneath him, you've got a Morris Williams who's an emerging freshman, but can you bank on that to go throughout the season? Mm-hmm. I don't know that you can just yet. So those are a couple things for me. It's the depth that probably keeps me from pushing it. Now, again, I'm not saying that you can't get to 10-2. You can. I can build a case for you to do it, but you're going to have to remain healthy, and you're going to have to make sure that some guys, like you said, come around and continue to progress. And probably if you're looking for guys that if they take that next step, or at least maybe even get back to where they were, I just named one of them. It's Kayan Lee. You're going to have a lockdown corner this year. I think he's probably the closest to what you have to that if he plays with some consistency. And what we've heard out of fall camp, and I think what you guys have reported is that he's had some really brilliant moments, and then he's had some trouble shaking and getting to the next play sometimes where he hasn't necessarily performed up to his expectation. So can he learn to play the next play? Forget a bad play, move on to the next, because when you're on that island, when you're a cornerback, you have to have a very short memory. And I think he's plagued by some of that, and that's not untypical of very young players. I think the other one that probably is Peyton Thorne, right? He has to take that step forward. If Peyton Thorne gives you the kind of production you got at Michigan State in that 2021 type year, where you're a shade over 60% passing, but your yardage is over 3,000 plus, your touchdowns are 20 plus, your interceptions are around 10 or less, well, then that means that Auburn is probably in that 8-4 range. Now, would I love the completion percentage to be north of 65%? Absolutely. But he hasn't proven that he can do that just yet. Is that a byproduct of the offense he was in at Michigan State? Or is that a byproduct of Peyton's natural accuracy? We're going to find out this year, because I think Hugh Freeze runs a very quarterback-friendly offense. He puts quarterbacks in really great positions for high-efficiency throws. And so if he can get to that point where he's up above 65% completion percentage, and they're really not limiting him in games, because last year they didn't really let him throw up to his average. I think he averaged 20 passes a game or something like that. It was.
Look, there was times where it was lower than that, I felt like. But yeah, probably on average, I guess.
Yeah. So if you're on average throwing it 30 times a game, you're at 65% completion percentage, and you're hitting some of those explosives down the field. And if Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, that young freshman wide receiver crop, because you know what the running backs are going to do. I think we all feel comfortable about Jarquez and Damari and even Jeremiah Cobb to a degree. The only other spot that I can think of from an offensive standpoint is the left tackle position. That's the one that I've got eyeballs on, in that, is it TJ Johnson? Is it the big transfer, Percy Lewis, that we brought in? Is it Dylan Wade? Who solidifies themselves as the left tackle that allows this team to move and put the best five on the field? That's probably the other spot that you're looking at. And can one of those guys step forward and kind of be the guy? Because at that left tackle position for a right-handed quarterback, you typically want that to be the best athlete, the most dominant offensive lineman that you have. You want that person to be the guy. That is the premium position. That's the one that gets paid in the NFL. And so can somebody take a step forward at that position? So those are probably the three spots that I'm looking at for taking a step forward. And again, as far as what could potentially shape my expectation to meet more at the 7-5, it would be the depth. That is my only real concern moving into this year.
Yeah, I was looking up completion percentages under Freeze at Ole Miss, and those guys were all 60 and above every year he was there. Nobody ever really beyond about 65. It was pretty much between 60 and 65, which kind of makes some sense. I'm no offensive genius, but in that offense, I feel like, I don't know, on one hand, I guess it could be something where you could have a really high percentage if you're just taking what the defense gives you, but it's also such a read and react. You got to be on the same page, and there's just a lot of variables in that thing too, man. That sometimes things can go wrong. And yeah, Peyton ended up with 20 attempts a game last year, but 26 against Mississippi State, 27 against Vanderbilt, 32 against Samford. So he had other games: 17 against UMass, 14 against Cal, 12 against Texas A&M. Now, granted, there's some offensive issues, and he didn't play the whole game. 19 against Georgia, 13 against Ole Miss, 16 against Alabama. So he had quite a few SEC games where he didn't even get to 20, and he was like there's probably an average of 16-ish. So I think that's a big one. And that's probably, Peyton's probably still the biggest X factor. I don't know, man. Everything we hear from coaches and players and from talking to people that would know, it's not even drinking the Kool-Aid. There's not. I try to feel like I'm a somewhat skeptical, like somewhat
Sure.
fair-minded person, there are a ton of reasons to think he's going to have a great season. There just are. Beyond the personnel being better around him. I've talked to people that would know that think he's playing as good a football as he's ever played. 21 Michigan State, you name it, doesn't even matter. High school, middle school, whatever. And so, I think he's in a great spot. I wrote a little bit in that piece on Saturday, and but like last year, I don't want to. I'm like Hugh Freeze. I don't want to keep talking about last year. Like he's kind of like, when he gets to those questions, he's like, God, can we just move on? And I get it. Last year was a just unmitigated disaster on offense.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes, it was a joke, and you don't always hear everything when it's going on and stuff. And you kind of, when stuff sort of the dust settles and people are more willing to talk a little bit because everybody's sort of gone their separate ways, and there's but bad, just not good. And so, if Peyton's everything that we think he can be, I'm with you. I think the depth is probably the limiting factor with the team, and I'm with you on championship depth. To me, it's like the guy that steps in. You feel like if you walked into Alabama or if you walked into Georgia, is that guy as good as Kayin Lee? No. But do I think he's just a complete liability? No.
Absolutely.
He's not Kayin Lee, but I think he can compete enough to still give us a chance. Like, that's championship depth to me. Now, some programs have got just put another first rounder in. Okay. I mean, there's a few of those programs may have that kind of talent where they'll just plug another guy in who in a year was going to start anyway and be a whatever. But for the most part, it's plug a guy in where you're like, okay, I think he's gonna compete, and I don't feel like he's a complete liability. I think he still can help us potentially win a big football game. That's where I think Auburn's not quite there yet. I think, I think the secondary staying healthy. I still go back to these receivers. Like, I think I said this on another show. I don't know. Maybe I said this last time we were together or something like. But what if Cam Coleman is every bit of what he's going to be, and what if he's more? Like, what if he's more? I think we're being very fair in our expectation for him. Like, he's going to be really good, but I don't see anybody out there calling for him to be like, well, Cam's going to catch 950 yards, 1,000 yards, and he's going to have 9 touchdowns and 10 touchdowns. Nobody's really – I think everybody's like, he's going to be really good, but nobody has any crazy expectations. But what if he is like every bit of what we think he's going to be, and a little bit more, to the point where you're going, holy crap, like this dude against, Oklahoma just went off for 8 for $130 and 3 touchdowns. And you're like, okay, and we all knew he was good, but we weren't going to put that on. I mean, right. There's some things like that. What if Perry Thompson is just some dude who in the red zone is a killer? What if Amaris Williams is every bit of what they say in terms of, and he starts coming off the edge, and you're going, whoa, these situations, he's just getting in like a young Jeff Holland, and he's a missile seeker. He's a heat-seeking missile. And so there are some of those where you start to go, okay, that could, but I think the ones that bring you back down to earth are depth and, an injury at receiver, or an offensive line not quite gelling, which could really throw a wrench in it. Or for me, interior defensive line, like, are they not holding up the way they need to? There's definitely some of those as well.
No, I hear you. And let me give you a stat line, because I think that Peyton Thorne is every bit as good as Bo Wallace, right? From an ability standpoint, there's no reason why Peyton Thorne cannot be comped to Bo Wallace.
Yeah.
64.8% completion percentage, 3,346 yards, 20 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. That was Bo Wallace's stat line 2013. And that was with 3,346.
It's a lot of yards.
A lot of yards, right? Now, I don't think they had the running game that Auburn's got, not on that Ole Miss ball club, so they probably threw the ball a little bit more. But scale those numbers back even 300 yards. If Peyton Thorne throws for that kind of a stat line, and I think it's a fair comparison to say that Cam Coleman like you talked about, we've said around 700 yards, 5 to 7 touchdowns, something of that nature. That's kind of expectation for him at this point. I think he's earned that with some of his performance in preseason camp. And that was Laquan Treadwell, or roughly there at. If Peyton has that kind of a year, 8-4 is absolutely on the table, Justin. I mean, there is no reason why it shouldn't be, because that's such leaps and bounds moving forward from where he was last year. I think 1,900 yards is where he ended, and that included the bowl game. I mean, he was sub 2,000. That's a whole
1755. Not a lot.
Think about how little that is. I mean, that's less than 150 a game almost.
Yeah, 135 a game.
135 a game. Push that to 200 yards a game, and how much more productive we are on offense if you don't lose the running game that you had last year. And I think, to me, that's the biggest part is that when things get bottled up and teams roll down that extra safety in the box and you got 8-man looks, can Auburn say, you know what, we can win a matchup in a one-on-one on the outside. I've got Cam down the sideline for a big one. And now we have an extra layer or a counter punch that we can mix in there that you didn't have this time last year. 7 to 10 more points a game, is Cam Coleman worth that? And I'm not just talking about his touchdowns. I'm talking about having to account for him on the field. Mm-hmm. And now you can't roll coverage to Dre, or you can't roll coverage to Rivaldo, because they were able to take away Auburn's, due to lack of options, with the exception of Johnson and Rivaldo. Those were really your consistent big play threats, and occasionally Jay Fair, right? I mean, I don't want to knock him, but I just feel like we're in such a better place from a playmaking standpoint in the wide receiver core, that if, like you said, Cam goes out and he's every bit we think he's going to be, and then even a little bit more, if he's close to 1,000 yards, I guarantee you he's not doing that by himself. There's also other guys that are also eating, because that means that they're not able to roll coverage just to Cam and cover him up with 2 guys. You're still having to account for the other guys that are keeping you honest. So that means you have an overall offensive operation that's probably almost elite at that point, with production probably in the 500 to 700 yard range from at least 2 other receivers. Yeah. So it's a situation where if you get to that point, 8-4 is 100% on the table, maybe even more than that, unless, like you said, that if the defense takes a major step backwards, then maybe that's your issue. But I don't see that. I think you actually have answers, and I have a little bit of concern about Austin Keys being out and the amount of time that he missed to an MCL strain. Mm-hmm. But I've really been encouraged on what I've heard by Dorian Mausi, I think is how you say his last name. Yeah. Lord knows we don't want to be to pronunciate names again after the last show. But I've been encouraged by what I've heard about him. And if the young guys in the secondary continue to come on, and you've heard some, right? But we just haven't seen them yet in game action. So if those guys that you've talked about and that you guys have written about, and JC Hart being one of those, I would love to see that kid really flash and sustain himself as, that third corner, just because of the story. I mean, local kid, Lochapoka, valedictorian, wanted to be at Auburn, dream school. You would love to see a kid like that be rewarded and really play up to what his physical ceiling is. And I know that Wesley McGriff thinks a lot of him. I mean, I think he thinks if he puts it all together, you're talking about an NFL draft pick type kid.
Yeah. Yeah, the receivers, look, it's not like it's some massive high bar, but, I wrote that I was thinking about receivers, and I went back and looked at all their offenses. And, I mean, it's got the potential this year. And I guess maybe next year, depending on who else you recruit and who else you bring into the portal, it could be better next year. I just think that Keandre is going to leave. And so, there will be a little bit of figure out maybe what next year's. But all these freshmen are going to be a year better. So there's no reason to think that next year's won't be maybe better than this group. But, this group could be the best receiver core in a decade.
Easily.
I mean, the 17 offense that team that was so good was just Darius Slayton and Ryan Davis. And that was more of a pro style. Kerryon Johnson rushed for like 1,700 yards. And so that was a little bit more. It was spread, but you had a big time rushing attack there. And then it was hit Slayton, hit Ryan Davis. There's more weapons in this receiving core. I mean, I went back to 2014. You had Duke and Sammy, pretty good 1-2 punch. And both those guys had really good years. I think both those guys were 800 plus yards. Like,
Yep.
Two guys. But, behind those two, not really. I mean, nobody really. 13, you had Sammy, but 13 was weird because you had Sammy, but then you had Ricardo Lewis, but he wasn't really Ricardo was used in such a weird way.
Yeah,
Marcus Davis was used here and there. You had Quan Bray was used in just short stuff. I mean, like, I think this receiving core can be the best in the decade plus, and I think they can do more traditional receiver things. Like, they're going to do some of the other stuff, but like whether it's Keandre Smith or Robert Lewis or Perry Thompson or Cam Coleman, like, I think guys are going to be able to get downfield a tad bit, and it's not just going to be short dink and dunk. That's probably the biggest thing. Peyton Thorne was 6.6 yards per attempt last year.
Yeah,
that's going to go up. I mean, Keandre can get down the field. Cam can get down the field. Perry can get down the field. Malcolm could down the middle of the field, certainly. And so hopefully that big playability goes up for all those guys. But yeah, I'm excited to maybe see a little bit of natural. I just want to see some natural instincts at receiver, man. You know what I mean? Like, when you see a wideout, you're like, that dude was born to be that.
Yeah.
That's what you want to see. I don't necessarily want to see some great athlete. I want to see it. I want to see some guys out there that you're like, you are doing what you were born to do. That's run a route and get open and catch a football, like, and snag a football every time and not make it look overly hard. Probably goes for the whole offense as a whole. Like, thinking about Auburn, like, can we just make offense look
easy?
God, yeah. I won't even take easy. I'll take, don't make it look like the hardest thing you've ever done. Maybe just make it look like sort of maybe a hard thing every now and then. Like, watching Auburn offense over the last 10 years is like, it's like offensive playbooks haven't made it down to Auburn yet. like we're a decade behind other people. It's been like that.
I agree with you. And probably since that 04 operation, has it looked just efficient and fluid, right? And I think those, Courtney Taylor, Ben, Devin, Anthony Mix, that group of receivers where you had answers. Yeah. And every time you rolled somebody out there, you had an answer contingent on the matchup or how they wanted to roll coverage or what they wanted to do as far as how to load the box to stop the run. You had answers at every spot. And it didn't start off that way. I mean, I think it was the LSU game was finally the breakthrough, or Tennessee was the breakthrough, but LSU was the game where Jason Campbell got his confidence when he hit that big shot for Courtney in the back of the end zone for that go-ahead touchdown. That was where you saw the light kind of come on for him. And from that point moving forward, the offense just hit a different gear. Can Peyton have one of those kind of moments this year? Like you said, with some natural receivers, guys that are meant to play the position, that make it smooth, efficient, fluid. And let's add on Robert Lewis and Sam Jackson in addition to that. I think Sam is a big play waiting to happen, and he's somebody who has a natural connection to Peyton, right?
Him and Malcolm, just get them the ball. It's a little bit of space, man. I think good things will happen.
I agree with you. So I'm excited for that part of it this year, to have finally some playmakers, because everybody, it seems like in the league, like you talked about, even Missouri with Luther Burton has had guys that, are featured guys that are going to play in the NFL. Alabama's had a plethora. LSU in that 2019 offense still ranks as one of the top of all time. Florida's had playmakers. Georgia's had playmakers. Everybody, and look, I'm not trying to down, but Seth and Anthony are our last real two. And even, let me give him some credit here. But if Kobe stays at Auburn, maybe he's one of those guys. But he transfers to UCF. He's put up good stats down there. I would have liked to have seen what he could have done in the SEC. But we just haven't had a guy. Haven't had those answers. Haven't had guys that, like you said, make it look natural. Just have the ability to go out and separate and make plays. It's just been a mismatch. If you don't scheme them just perfect, and then the quarterback has to make an absolute dime of a throw, it just looks difficult at times. And even you talk about another part of it about being a natural receiver and just making plays. Even when Peyton was struggling, he would go out and throw a dime every now and again, and the guy would drop it.
Yeah.
And if you're already in that kind of a situation and then another guy drops it, what does that do to your confidence? So how they take the momentum that they built in fall camp, how they move that forward, what did they do in that litmus test game against Cal? Like you said, did they go out and win by 17? If they go out and win by 17 against a bowl team last year, because Cal, for those that don't know, they went 6-6 and ended up getting into a pretty decent bowl. And I think they've improved their roster through the transfer portal. You go out and win that game by 17 in JHS. Well, now we're talking. Now I really see 8-4 as a potential.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, like you said, if you struggle and you only win that one by 3, you're kind of looking around like, did we get any better? Like, I know we added some pieces, but did we get any better?
Yeah.
And you start to have that doubt creep in. And that's where Furies would have to do a really good job at that point of rallying the troops and getting everybody back on the same page, because I do believe that they have improved by leaps and bounds from this time last year. I really think it's a different team, and it has significantly more explosive firepower on offense, or it has the potential to put up points in bunches.
Yeah. I think the Arkansas game is going to be interesting too. Nobody's talking about that one, and I'm not saying Auburn should win it for sure. They're going to probably be I would expect to be maybe a 10-point favorite, whatever it might be. But they're going to be, I think they're going to have a little bit of feistiness to them.
Oh yeah,
you got a couple of guys in the portal, and I just got a sneaky feeling that they're going to try to get back to being kind of that ground and pound type game. And when you got Oklahoma looming the next week, players are going to be thinking about that, especially if they're 3-0. Oklahoma's next week. It's a recipe. That game's a recipe for to come in and be in a fist fight. Arkansas plays Oklahoma State on the road, and then they play UAB. So like they've got a couple of competitive games before Auburn, but like they could lose to Oklahoma State. Maybe they squeak by UAB or something, and you're like, Arkansas is going to roll in here, and we're going to be whatever, and you're thinking about Oklahoma the next week. I'm just telling you that's got that week's a recipe for that to come out and be a brawl. You beat them last year, you crushed them last year. Just got a recipe to come in and be a little bit of a brawl if you're not careful.
No, the best thing that could happen to Auburn in that situation is for Arkansas to go out and beat Oklahoma State and just absolutely pound UAB. So when you flip on the film, you're looking at a 3-0 team that's coming into your house for the SEC opener. They've got your complete attention at that point. Like you said, if they go out and they struggle with Oklahoma State and lose that game, and then they're lackluster in the next week because they're a little bit flat playing against UAB. Well, and I know that Bobby Petrino, he still knows how to call plays. He hasn't forgotten how to do that. Sam Pittman will be fired up, and then Travis Williams is going to be bringing his defense into Jordan-Hare, a place he played himself. That will be a pride game for him. I guarantee you they will be up for that game just from the standpoint of the defense. And I don't know what the offense will do, but I know that Trav will try to have his guys ready to go. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think that, the more I think about that game, I think it could be every bit the litmus test is of Cal in just a different way. I mean, I think that could be a game that let's say they beat Cal and they look pretty good and they're 3-0. That Arkansas one's going to show you as well. Like, is this a mature team? Are they a team that can go into Bama and Georgia and compete? If so, then they'll beat Cal and they'll show up and they'll be pros and business-like, and they'll take care of business against Arkansas. And that doesn't turn into some near upset where you're looking ahead. If they come out, if they take care of business against Cal and Arkansas, given the circumstances of sort of those games, then it'll speak a lot too about, I think, this team's mindset and where they're at and all that good stuff. I think the Arkansas game would be an interesting litmus test, but for different reasons.
No, I hear you. I mean, and if you listen to the Ole Miss media, which look, they got some credible guys that are on that beat, they will tell you that the Hugh Freeze experience is one where he plays. I mean, he coaches exceptionally well in the big games, but then he'll have some emotional letdown games. And does Arkansas become one of those emotional letdown ones?
Oh boy.
That's what you don't want to see happen. You talked about a mature team, but this is Hugh Freeze beating the narrative that other people have cast on him. And
and that game, I mean, I wrote about it a little bit, but like just us talking about it, that might be the game this year. I don't think it's Vanderbilt. I think the Arkansas game could be the game. Like, if he's gonna mess one up, is that there's a lot of reasons that game could be much closer than it should be.
Yep. I agree with you, man. And can you push back against that, go out and win by 10 points? You don't have to, it doesn't have to be what it was last year, right? But you need to go out and you need to control that game from start to finish and win by double digits. And if you do that, then in my opinion, you will have done what you needed to do to get prepared for Oklahoma the next week.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That'll be that. They're going to be an interesting game, interesting team, Arkansas. All right, man. We'll do this again next week, and we'll have a game to talk about. That's kind of crazy. And should be a blowout. And so should be a good first game to get some feet wet for some guys, and then it's into the thick of it with Cal. But I think we're all on the same page. I mean, I think most Auburn fans are on the same page of not putting too much on this team, having some quiet optimism, probably just from a few years now of mediocrity. But also, I think that I'm in touch with a lot of the fans. Like, I think there's a sense of, I'm not going to put too much on you guys, but like, I'm ready. Can we please accomplish something noteworthy this year besides trotting a team out and beating the teams that couldn't beat us anyway? And another season goes by, and you're like, well, it was a season. Season happened, and the games were played, and that, like, when Freeze talks about last year feeling like he didn't accomplish enough, I don't want another one of those where you're like, well, culture's better, I guess that means something, but didn't really notch any big win, didn't really get over the hump there. So now you headed to year 3 where you're still trying to maybe get over the hump and have a marquee win. I don't want to be in that position. So
no.
We'll see, man. It's gonna be exciting. It feels great. The last few days, like we've had some mornings, I've got up at 68, and I just know next Saturday it's gonna be like the surface of the sun. You know what I mean? They're just messing with us, and people are gonna go out tailgate. Like this past week, people are gonna be like, "Nice, okay." Like it's 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. It's 75. It's not quite hot yet. And watch next Saturday just be like 88 at 6 in the morning.
Oh yeah, and it's so hot. You see steam coming off the field during here. You know what I mean?
It's coming. That Cal game's gonna be. It's gonna be a scorcher. You already know it's gonna be so hot. Woo! But it's fun, man. We'll get another season under our belt. Should be exciting. Some exciting freshmen to watch. Recruiting going in the right direction, so you got some things to look forward to there. So it's I mean, somebody said on our board, like, as much optimism since, like, when were you this optimistic about the program going into a season? I mean,
2019 with Bo Nix, probably.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, me and Bo, you thought the world of Bo and recruiting. I'd have to go back and look at recruiting rankings. I mean, at that point, it was probably still okay. It was fine.
Yeah.
It wasn't on this level, but it was, probably. I mean, everybody's excited about Bo, I guess.
Yeah, you were excited about Bo, excited about Seth and Schwartz, and what can you do? Tank was in the backfield at that point. So you had a lot of pieces. You had, I think, the schedule set up for some reasons of optimism, and that was the last year of Derek Brown and Marley Davidson. So you thought something was potentially special, right? You could win 10 games that year. And that's probably the last time I can remember being that level of excited.
Yeah, and the 2020 class was ranked 7th, so recruiting had to have been going pretty decent in 2019, and the 19 class finished 12th. So recruiting was good. Yeah, you're probably right. And it's been 5 years since you've probably felt like this going into the season about the program as a whole. And you honestly probably feel better, because at that point you're on the tail end of the Gus Malzahn tenure, and you're going, golly, I've kind of seen what I'm like. We sort of know what Gus is. Like, I can pretty much tell you what's going to happen. Like with Hugh, there's a little bit more of what can happen. With Gus, you had some stuff. You had 15 and you had 16, and you're like, and you had 18. And you're like, so I would say maybe more. I mean, it might be go back to 14 when you had a great season under your belt and you weren't sure what Gus was going to do as a coach, and you felt like the sky's the limit. It could be that.
Yeah, and for those of us that knew the added layers of off the field of the contention as it pertained to the Malzahn era from certain boosters. So, you know what I mean? You're not dealing with any of that anymore, right? Like, everybody's on the same page. And that's not me knocking Gus. Look, I still think a lot of him and Christie, and he, as far as what he did at Auburn while he was there, he was significantly better than his predecessor. That's for damn sure. You know what I mean? Like, and maybe I'm setting a low bar there, but Gus brought a lot to the table. I think Hugh what he's done is there's more connectiveness there between him and the people that he needs in his corner to support him to keep that kind of a situation from transpiring.
Yeah, it is interesting how that sort of happened. Chiswick and Harsin to me are very similar in a lot of ways, and then they're both followed by Malzahn and Freeze, who I think are similar in
Yes.
a lot of ways. And I think some of the downfalls of Chiswick and Harsin are the same downfalls. Chiswick just had a better staff recruiting, but like them as people and the culture and the way the program is going behind the scenes,
Yes.
a lot of similarities there. And then Malzahn and Freeze come in behind those guys, and they have a lot of similarities. It's kind of funny to think about how that happened. So I guess that means, I don't know, whoever replaces Hugh Freeze, I guess we try to put and otherwise we'll know what's coming.
Yeah, let's hope time's not a flat circle on that one, buddy.
Yeah. All right, let's get out of here. Appreciate everybody for joining us. Go to auburnlive.com and subscribe, and go to Auburn Live YouTube and sign up for the Plus channel. I'm not sure if this is, I guess we'll just figure it out. I don't know if this is going to be Plus or not. Some of our shows are Plus. Some of them are going to be free. I'm not sure we've completely worked that out yet. So I don't know. Maybe somebody watching this is on Plus, or if you're watching this free, go join Auburn Live Plus, and you'll get a bunch of extra exclusive interviews. Like we've had, there's tons of recruiting intel that's been on that channel. The Peter Burns and Stephen Pearl, like some of that stuff has been on that channel. And it's like $3 a month if you don't want to join the site. So go do that as well. All right, Alan, we'll get out of here. Cole was under the weather a little bit today. He'll join us normally as well. And so we'll knock these out. We'll be back next week to talk about a game, man. It'll be fun. I'll see you then.